Hey everyone, this is a clip from a recent episode of Another Pass, where we talk about movies and all the struggles that go into making them. If you like it, check out the whole podcast. You can find it at certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts. The movie is definitely trying to play with this 60s aesthetic. We talked about how it's got this style that we can't, it's retro future, yada yada yada. I love some of the spots that they do in it. Like when we see the inside of their house and we see the flat screen TV, but it's still shaped like a CRT. Yeah. I was like, fuck, I want that flat screen TV. And that was before flat screen TVs were becoming, I mean, they were obviously on the rise. But this is the era where plasma TVs were $10,000 instead of now it's a couple $100. Oh my God, I loved the way they made all this future tech feel also kind of homey at times. That was really cool.
Yeah.
I think that carries over into a lot of the production design just kind of broadly too, because if you look at the way that Emil Hirsch is dressed and styled for this movie, his hair is a little bit blue in the way that maybe a cartoon character with black hair would have that slight tint to it, and some of his costumes are racer clothing in the color palette of the classic ascot look from the cartoon. And I think they do a good job of kind of melding the older aesthetics and carrying the spirit of that over. Like you were saying with the flat screen that looks like this rounded retro TV, it's the spirit of the old show, but it clearly exists in a modern sensibility and a modern design sense.
Yeah, the style choices I thought were across the board just fucking perfect. I loved all the different racetracks having very different kind of settings to it. Those all look great. I love. So one of my problems actually with this movie is that we don't get the big rundowns of racers until the later races. It's basically a thing for the second half of the movie. And I love that we get these weird casts of characters where it's just here's all the racers that we're dealing
Oiler,
with.
Girl exactly. Who throws beehive.
So, some of the puns were ridiculous. I had a visceral sense memory when we got to the Viking team, where this is not a Beowulf rant. Sam, this is not.
But I was preparing myself. I was.
No, I actually.
I was just waiting for you to be and it reminded me of Grenville, and I was gonna be I'm done. I'm out. Goodbye.
Nope. Although they do throw bees, but because they do
throw bees.
No, but this movie was just unlocking memories for me left and right, and so one of those unlocked was oh right, I remember we just. One weekend at my fraternity in college had a Viking night where we all made tinfoil Viking hats and bought stuffed animals that we shredded to make fake furs that we'd wear, and then we just ordered 15 buckets of KFC and just we're just gross eating meat together. And I was oh man, this that feels like that. Oh, and they're being bribed with the same kind of pageantry in this weird retro future setting. I loved it. I love that we're not even going to deal with trying to explain oh, why are there Vikings?
Just
why the fuck not?
Yeah, why not?
A lot of those characters too are ported over from Snake Oiler was frequently a villain in Speed Racer episodes past. So it's also kind of a nice little Easter egg for people who know what's going on. My favorite version of this is there is the monster car, which is one of my dad's favorite episodes of the cartoon. It's this big red truck that Racer X kind of does a whole spy mission in the beginning of the movie with.
Yeah, I love that scene.
Really fun scene. Maybe they could have cut it down a little bit in terms of how much it's actually relevant to the whole movie, but it's super, super fun. But that big red truck, that's the monster car from the Speed Racer cartoon. Snake Oiler, he's a frequent villain from it. So I think that they're really pulling from the elements that are fun and goofy in all the right ways and just kind of dropping them into the world that they already fit into because they've done a lot of the scene setting to make everything just sort of be suspension of disbelief accepted, and then you get to just kind of party it up with with all of these various different villainous car drivers that all have their own motivations, whether that's furs and meat for the Viking team or just a lot of money for the Pink Lady team that's also there.
Yeah, there were moments that felt very 66 Batman to me.
Yeah.
Specifically the truck scene with Racer X, especially when all the goons are grabbing guns and go into the doors and you're oh, they're on a truck because at first you're oh, they're in an office. But then when the racers are all are all themed and all bribed and it's okay, let's beat people up. But especially the Racer X stuff, because Racer X really, I had a moment where I'm oh, you could just do this with the Batmobile. And it's no, okay, so it's just Batman in this moment here. And that's awesome. I fucking adore these moments here.
I also love the fact that the bad guy had piranhas because as a kid growing up, there were two things, especially in 80s cartoons, that were the scariest things, and there was quicksand and piranhas.
I was gonna say it's I knew you were going to say quicksand was the other thing because it's yes, those two.
That's like the one thing missing from the Casa Cristo race is no one fell into any quicksand when they were going to the desert.
Exactly. Like, honestly, like, I was waiting for the quicksand because it's so funny. Like, I really there was a time in my young life as a child where I was like preparing myself for quicksand and for piranhas. I don't live in a place where either of those are even present. But it just seemed like such a big thing. And so, like, I got the piranhas early on. And, of course, like, I always love when a bad guy loves an evil animal. Like, well, not evil. I mean, it's not evil. But, like, an animal that can do lots of damage and treats them like they're babies. I do. I always love that. Like, oh, no, my babies. They're gonna die. And it's like, sir, they would eat you. They would eat you. But I love that he loved it. So I love that. But yeah, I felt really sad that there was no quicksand in the desert. I mean, like, how fun would that have been when they were in the brawl, like, with the gangsters? If they had kicked one and one fell in quicksand, and they're like, oh no, quicksand, and they just turned around and just left. I don't know. That would just be for Sam, really. Like,
yeah. But, Big knock to Speed Racer that we do not once see a car sinking into quicksand in the middle race of the movie when they have that brawl in the desert.
Yeah, it would have been easy to put in there, and it is surprising once you actually say it out loud. It's like, oh yeah, well they're crossing off all the check boxes. Yeah.
I mean, for me, it could have just been a person, you know? Like, a lot of those, you could have just replaced, because I don't want to make this movie any longer than it already is. Like, that is not part of the goal. But any one of those, like, other shots with someone getting kicked could have resulted in them falling in some quicksand. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, or it could have been a good opportunity to remind everyone about, like, the quick save feature that they all have. Like, if the car fell into quicksand and then, like, it's starting to sink and then the green goo, like, fills up the cockpit and then ejects them. Just to remind you, like this movie is, while there is a lot of gun violence and there is a lot of, like, piranhas eating body parts and, like, a lot, there's
you don't see a lot of blood, you know? It's like, it's violent, but it's not brutal, if that makes sense, in the way that, like, a Fast and the Furious
the piranhas only ate one finger in terms of body parts. That other thing could have been from anything. It was just a slab of meat on a bone.
We don't know,
but from what? We don't know from what, is what I'm saying.
Yes.
Like, I don't know why I'm defending the piranhas, but I just feel like I wanted to be clear. They weren't eating lots of people. Like, they weren't overeating. They were just, doing what they got. That's all.
Right. No, Sam, we've established that one of your things is having sympathy for villainous characters in productions that we're looking at because their motivation makes sense. Like,
I never thought that I was that type of person until I joined this podcast. I didn't think that I would be an apologist for so many different villains. But I think the piranhas deserve it. I don't think any of the other villains in this movie deserve it. I think they all deserved to go down, including the one that Tim Tim murdered. I believe that they did, like, he had that coming. But the piranhas, that it wasn't their fault.
Remember, if you like that clip, check out the podcast. You can find it at certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts.